What would you think of if I asked you what love was? What is love? That's our question today. What comes to your mind when you think of love? Is it maybe a girlfriend or boyfriend or a husband or wife? Maybe we think of our parents or we think of our children. Those things tend to come to mind when we think of love, because when we think of love, we think of that feeling, that warm, fuzzy, happy, gooey feeling we get when we think of that person that makes us feel that way. But what if I told you that that wasn't love? A little counterintuitive to what we've been taught by our culture, but what if I said that that is not what love is? That love is not actually an emotion. Love is not a feeling. Well, if that's the case, then what is love? Well, love is action. And we're going to use our key text for today is going to be 1 John 3:16 through 17. And I'll read this to you. It says, "We know love by this, that He, Jesus Christ, laid down His life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brethren. But whosoever has the world's goods and sees his brother in need and closes his heart against him, how does the love of God abide in him?" And verse 18, "Little children, let us not love with word or with tongue, but in deed and in truth." Now, let's look at the organization of this passage before we unpack the deeper meanings in it. There's a structure here, okay? The first thing he does, the first thing John does is he uses Christ as the example we are to follow. So we look at this pattern. We have 16a, the first part of verse 16, says that because of this, because of what Jesus did, and then it moves to we should do this. Because of this, we should do this. If we don't do this, there's a warning put in there. So it emphasizes the importance. It's not just he's suggesting we should do this, but that we really have to do this, because, or else. So, therefore, in conclusion, let's do this. So just to run through it, because of this, we should do this. If we don't do this, so let's just do this. All right, that's the structure. You can find that kind of a structure in a lot of places in the Bible. The biblical writers give us a reason to do something, what it is we should do, why, a warning about the consequences if we don't, and then summarizing at the end. Now, so let's look at the text itself a little bit closer, and not just its structure, but let's pull out some of its deeper meanings. Let's look at this first part here. And I want to pull in these two scriptures just to reference real fast, just to kind of tie it in with the rest of the New Testament. We don't want a proof text here. But I'm reminded of Matthew 18:23 through 25. This is the story of the unforgiving servant. You remember the servant goes into the king, to the master, and he owes him a lot of money, and the master's going to throw him in prison until he pays it back. But the guy begs and says, no, please give me more time. And the master doesn't just give him more time, he actually forgives the debt entirely. But then the servant turns around, as soon as he leaves, he goes outside and he sees somebody owes him money, and he starts shaking him down. Well, the master finds out, and he says, hey, I forgave you all your debt, but you turned around and did not forgive somebody else their debt. And so he ended up in prison anyways. Now that's a lesson on forgiveness, but the principle that we're pulling out of it from 1 John is that because the master did something for us, we should turn around and do that same thing for other people. The principle still applies to this passage. Now, 1 Corinthians 13:4-8, that's the love chapter, right? The great love chapter that Paul writes about. And this backs up what 1 John is saying that love is. In fact, see, let me back up just a little bit. Because Jesus loved us this way, we should love this way. Okay? The story in Matthew is telling us that we are obligated to Christ and to our fellow Christians and fellow man in general to act a certain way because of the way Christ acted for us. So, and if we don't do this, it says, how does the love of God abide in the man who doesn't do that? It's a rhetorical question. The answer is that it doesn't. If So, I think we've all known somebody who we were a little surprised to find out they were a Christian because they're so cranky and ornery all the time and just miserable people. It's like, where's their joy? Where's their love? It kind of, how the love of God is not abiding in that person. So because Jesus did it, we do it. If we don't do it, we could be in a lot of trouble. Now, going on to verse 18, this is where we can pull in 1 Corinthians to help us with this verse. It says, let us not love with tongue, or with word or with tongue, but in deed and in truth. In other words, let's not just say that we love somebody, but we have to demonstrate that. If we look at 1 Corinthians, I've just made a quick list of, it says what love is, and it says this is what love isn't. Love is patient, kind, forgiving. It rejoices in truth, slow to anger, etc., etc. You're familiar with it. But if you notice the list, nothing on here is an emotion. Nothing on here is a feeling. Jealousy, maybe that's an emotion. But it's in the not side, right? That's what love is not. So here we have love more as an attitude and an action, but not an emotion, not a feeling. It's an action. So going back to verse 18 then, but in deed and in truth. What John is trying to get across here is that it doesn't matter how much you tell somebody you love them. If you don't demonstrate it, then that love means nothing. If I tell my children that I love them all the time, but then I'm always too busy to spend time with them, well, eventually they're going to stop believing that I love them. If I don't ever hold my wife's hand or buy her flowers, she's not going to believe that I love her just because I told her that. So we have to love in deed and in truth. And to notice the deed and the truth are tied together here. In action and in truth, the truth is in the deed. The truth is not in the word or the tongue. The truth is in the deed. The truth is in the action. So how can we live this out with the people around us? I mean, with our kids and our wives, husbands, that's fairly obvious. But think of something. You can do random acts of kindness. This is an easy one. Go mow your neighbor's lawn. When they're out of town one time, just sneak over there, mow their lawn. They'll get back from wherever they were and be like, wow, my lawn is mowed. That's loving your neighbor. You bake Christmas cookies for your neighbor. Take your neighbor down the street who doesn't have a car or they're elderly. Go pick them up, take them to the grocery store. Help them carry the groceries in the house. Little things like that are love. Submitting to authority can be love. We admonish our children to submit to the authority of their parents because that demonstrates love. Christ says that if we love Him, we submit to His authority, the authority of our pastors, the authority of our boss. We should submit to those authority. Giving our time to minister to another person. Everybody knows that somebody that they don't want to run into in the hall at work or even in the lobby at church because they're just their life is all just terrible and they're going to tell you all about it and you'll miss the whole service. You know what? Take a Sunday and just go ahead and listen to that person. That's love, investing your time. John says that we should die for the brethren. Obviously, he doesn't mean we go around martyring ourselves all the time. We can only do that once anyways, and I got kids to think about, so I can't be dying all the time. But what I can do is what he clarifies in that next verse, which is, whosoever has the world's goods. I have the world's goods. I'm blessed. We go through our house at least once a year, and we find that we have extra coats that the kids outgrown or that we don't wear anymore. We have blankets we don't use anymore, or way too many. Maybe a newly married couple that didn't have, their family was poor and they couldn't go to, Target and buy all the stuff on the registry. Maybe they need our extra set of dinner plates. All kinds of things that you can do to show love for that other person. So I want you to ask yourselves a couple questions as we close out this video. I want you to ask yourself, how have you been pursuing the concept, let me rephrase that. How has pursuing the cultural concept of love affected your life? What have been the results of that pursuit? And what would be different about that pursuit if you began pursuing love in the biblical sense? And then I want you to ask yourself, what can I do this week Think of that person. Think of somebody. What can I do this week that will demonstrate love to another human being? In fact, what can I do today? Because if you're watching this video early in the day, then you've got plenty of time to show love. Plenty of time. So what can I do this very day? So I hope that this affects how you live out today and this week and this month. And I hope every time God puts that opportunity in front of you, you remember, oh, this is my opportunity to show the Lord that I love him by showing this person that I love them in deed and in truth.